Right, welcome to this deployment tactics video. It's for my Eldari Army here in this episode. So a new series here, shorter format video, and it's to talk about tactics for deployment, which is absolutely crucial for your games of 10th edition Warhammer 40,000. If you deploy wrong, it could seriously cost you the game, and a bad deployment can result in mounting casualties, being tactically out of shape, which is going to prevent you from scoring points. So it really can handicap you during the game. So deployment is crucial. It's an element that I've sort of looked over or neglected a fair bit, and so some tactics videos focusing on that for each of the factions I think is a good idea. And by all means, take some tips from this. Leave your own comments and feedback in the comment section as well. Right, so mention the battle mat and terrain that we're using in this game. So the battle mat is from GameMat.eu. It's called Imperial Refinery. This one is 60 by 44 inches in size, so perfect for regular games of 10th edition 40k. And then we're also using the Chem Zone terrain sets mixed with some Games Workshop terrain. The Chem Zone terrain set is the vats that you can see across here. You also get these containers, you get loads of those in the set, and they are the same size ratio as Munitorum containers from Games Workshop, so they match up really well. I've stacked them up together. Boxes and barrels and containers are all part of that set as well. You also get pipes and some extra like generators in with that set as well. So you can check out GameMat.eu for your supplies of pre-painted terrain sets and battle mats in all shapes and sizes. There's also a discount code that you can use in the video description for 11% off across the store, and they are shipping worldwide. So for the Eldar, my usual list running the Trinity of Wraithlords, so looking something like this. Wave Serpent, just briefly run through the list here so you can see what we have. So for Wave Serpent, 5 Fire Dragons, Fire Pike in the squad, and then Fugan, the Burning Lance, the Phoenix Lord to go with them. Then inside of Falcon, 5 Banshees with Jane Zar, Phoenix Lord. So we've got a mobile shooting, anti-tank, anti-monster unit, and then a very swift anti-infantry, anti-medium infantry unit here in the form of the Banshees, and then some firepower support from the transport vehicles. Then some walking toughness here with swords with the 3 Wraithlords, all equipped with double Bright Lance. They're able to provide a bit of firepower support. There's a Spirits here to hang around with them as well. We have the Avatar of Khaine, which I've made some controversial choices with as far as deployment and using in the game is concerned, but we'll talk about him here in this video. And then a swift, very, very swift. All the Eldar here mostly are very fast, but this is a very, very quick part of the army. It's the bikers, so Shroud Runner squad of 3, 2 separate squads of 3 Shining Spears, and then a larger squad of 6 of the Wind Riders here, all equipped with Shuriken cannons. So that's the Eldar list. The question is how to deploy them and to deploy them effectively. So a few bits to talk about here about the board. With the Eldar, it's going to be a very swift army. Trademarks for them is the ability for most of the army to be able to rapidly redeploy or shift across the board very, very quickly. And also coordination, so using multiple units to coordinate an attack at a certain point or a certain target. That's with firepower and close combat. So that's the kind of flexibility of the Eldar and their ability to strike precisely and well during the game, and their ability just to maneuver around the board very, very quickly. So we're deploying with that in mind. It doesn't really matter the deployment zone here. We're going to go for Dawn of War, so just 12 inches in, marked by the orange dice. And then in games of 10th edition, there's going to be a central objective, and usually 2 others in no man's land. One on the right in this case, Eldar going in this direction, and then one on the Eldar left. The opponent's objective are placed over there so you can see it clearly, and then I'll just put our home objective just here. I put those out because they're good reference points in the game, and obviously the whole game revolves around the control of those objectives to pick up your points, plus picking up some points for secondaries as well. For terrain, very briefly, we've got obscuring ruins here and here. It's going to affect deployment, so it's important to call it out. Ruins across here, obscuring, and then these structures here, not the gap in between, as obscuring. Those structures across there, obscuring also. So a good spread of line of sight blocking terrain here on this table. So my deployment is going to be quite protective. I want to protect the units that I have. Very soft units, I may well put them into reserve just to really protect them. So I'm declaring units that are going to go into reserve and declaring units going inside transports and so on. So it's quite obvious. Banshees, Janezar into the Falcon, and then Fugan and the Dragons into the Wave Serpent. These I found are quite soft, the Wind Riders, and they do pose a threat. The opponent will often go after them. So to keep them really safe, and I want to use them in ambush to come onto the board and flank and then lay down some firepower at full strength, I'll definitely flank with these. So I've just laid the model down, it's just a way of reminding me, and the opponents, they know they're going into regular reserve. Then 1 unit of Shining Spears. In this instance, sometimes I don't at all, it depends on the cover. Looking at the cover here, there's this area here and here. There's a little bit here, but there's not too much obscuring terrain. So I've got plenty of units that are going to try and make use of that. So it's going to get quite crowded. So if I find myself in that kind of situation, I don't want those Shining Spears being exposed to firepower early on in the game. So again, to keep them safe and to have them as an ambush type unit, it's just a small enough unit, I'm going to put those into reserve as well, so they can flank onto the board with the Wind Riders. So those 2 units into reserve. So the usual deployment is you do your obvious units first. So units that are not so important to you, and units where you're not so worried if the opponent knows where they are. So for example, I'll deploy the Shroud Runners first, because usually I have these hanging around just near the home objective. So I'll put these on here. I think I can obscure them well enough. I'll tuck them in like so. I've got obscuring across here, so the opponent's not going to see through. There's obscuring here, and then bear in mind this whole structure obscuring as well. So I think they're nicely protected. If this was too exposed, because they're so quick, I might deploy them somewhere safer, and then just on turn 1, just swing them across onto the home objective. But they're on patrol on the home objective. They can lend a bit of firepower support, but really their job's just to hang around there on the home objective. I'm not too worried if the opponent knows that. It's not a major tactical deployment there with that unit. So that's them done, and then the opponent's going to deploy unit and so on. So we'll be alternating then with the opponent for deployment. Units that I really want to try and keep till last is usually units such as the Fire Dragons, the Banshees, and the Avatar of Khaine. Those units I try and hold off till last. They're my most powerful, hard-hitting units. So I want to deploy them when I know where most of the opponent's force is, for me to attack them, but also for me to try and stay alive as well. I don't want to deploy early with these and the opponent then stacks up on the flank or has very fast units ready to go after them. So I'd rather wait and wait and wait, see how the opponent deploys, and then pick and choose where these are deployed on the table. So that means units that will deploy will be the Wraithlords, the trinity of those. I'll deploy them just one at a time. And usually with these 3, it's handy to have them hanging around together because they'll get the buffs and bonuses coming from the spirits here. But there's 4 placements there. These 5, you're going to be pushing towards half your army, half the opponent's army on the board as well. So I'm looking at these 3. There's buffs here for him, so I don't really want to split them up too far away from each other. But I reckon we can head towards these 2 objectives here. I don't want to spread across the entire board. We'll go for like a Wraith zone around here. So I might put one here, behind the obscuring terrain, but ready to move out to the objective. I think that's a good move with him. Remember, these are firepower, walking firepower platforms as well, they're Bright Lancers. And I might tuck one in here, if I can get him right in, like so, and he can walk around, perhaps head towards that objective. And I don't really want to deploy in the open. They're not as tough as they used to be, Wraithlords. So I may well end up stacking a second one here, again making use of the obscuring terrain. And then the little character, he gets lone, the spirits here, he gets lone operative if he's hanging around within 3 inches of one of these. It's a real safe place for him. It's going to be hanging around the toes of those 2. That's 4 drops, 4 deployments. I haven't really given away much here about my overall game plan. They're set up to move out towards objectives, that's quite obvious. These to anchor home objective, and I haven't really given away where everything else is going to go. So I think that's healthy enough. And it's just showing you how important it is for the order of deployment here. Just putting out your more obvious units, units that you know are going to have to deploy in a certain way. So I know these are going to have to push up and most likely head off towards no man's land objectives. So that's quite sort of obvious deployment. With them, may as well deploy those first and then save the tastier units till later. So what usually happens is the opponent's doing the same thing. They're holding off their powerful units. Say you're up against salamanders and Mike's keeping his land raiders as off the table for deployment. I don't know where they're going to go, and so what do we do about that? So I would probably go with a unit here, either of these two. So anti-tank. So logically, the best place to put this, if I don't know where the opponent's going to go, is somewhere central. It's going to give you the most reactive point on the board. So if I tuck this in here, it's really nicely obscured behind the building. I can go straight ahead. I can go to my right, or I can zoom across it won't take too long to get right over there onto the left hand side. So I've nicely deployed here, protecting myself, but also in an attacking position here. So let's presume the worst is happening and the shenanigans are continuing. The opponent's not putting out the most powerful unit, and that continues. I could do a similar kind of thing here. So deploy in a threatening way with the next unit. That's the Banshees. So it's looking a bit crowded here. Here's not offering me too much protection. It's just not worth putting that Falcon out and exposing it. Usually opponents can have some decent anti-tank capability. I would only deploy across here if, say, the opponent did have all their anti-tank across the other side and this was relatively safe, then I'd go for it. But I need to go somewhere safe from the table. So I've really picked here. It's another kind of setup. I can deploy pushing up, be nicely obscured, and then there's a threat range with the Banshees for close combat. So Falcon with the Banshees and Janzar inside. Tuck it up to the edge of the terrain. And I've got myself virtually obscured again with this. And it's a nice threatening range. Eldar are so quick. It's got 14-inch base move. With this, so again, I've got myself in a position to leap straight out onto an objective nice and quickly, so I can hop over towards that. Eldar are so quick on the table, so it's a big advantage. Or I can hold back. If the opponent goes to the objective first, I can then counterattack. So again, in a good position, nicely tucked away. Threat range then, this is for close combat, and it's surprisingly quick. So I've laid out some models here to show you threat range. This looks quite a distance away from the opponent, but Banshees move super quick, and so they can attack from here without the transport moving, and they can threaten a good third of the table, perhaps pushing towards half. For example, I've given you two examples here. Deploy 3, use agile maneuvers, or not, but if you really need to stretch, you can go for that. That's going to give me an extra 8 inches for movement. That's normal move, or 10 inches with an agile maneuver. That's going to take me then to there, where that second Banshee is. And then with Janzar, you get a guaranteed 6-inch advance, and you can still charge. So Janzar's making it all the way to there, and then you've got your charge range averaging about 7 or 8 inches. So I can pretty much reach units inside their own deployment zone across the other side. It's an amazing threat range to have. And again, if I was to head towards the central objective, deploy 3, move 8 or 10, add advance 6 and still charge, I'm getting to about there if I go across in that direction. So yes, tucked away in a corner, but still the threat range is fantastic for these in close combat. So specialist close combat type unit, deploying safely and then ready to pounce straight away. If in the game the situation arises, I really do need to shift to the left or shift to the middle, I'm inside transport vehicles that can just leap so quickly across the board, so relocation is really good. If the opponents burst through here, really powerful unit, I've got units here and here that can react very quickly and then combine together with close combat and firepower to concentrate their attacks across there. So I think this is, again, healthy enough, not exposing my units here, tucking them away with these two transports. So we've got not much left really, an Avatar of Khaine, and we've set a unit of Shining Spears to start on the board. So deploying and being a threat, the other crucial element is, and we've mentioned it already, is protecting units. There's no point in them getting blown away. So I'm thinking about the Shining Spear squad, looking around. I'm glad I've put one in reserve because I've run out of options for hiding these on the table. I've got 3 bases, and that's not obscuring. This is all exposed across here. It's just not worth me trying to go for that deployment. and that flank is by no means lost. I can flank with my reserve units, it's not out of the picture. So I've got two options again, really. I can deploy in here. This is quite good. Central. I can push up, tuck right in, and again be a threat range. But usually I'm not using these on turn one. Usually this is a unit to follow up, to get to about here and then pounce later on in the game. So I'm not worried about striking on the first turn with the Shining Spears. The main priority of these is position and then protection, those two things. So trying to keep them protected, not losing them straight away because the opponent will go after them, and also getting them into a decent position where they can strike. So positions such as here, where they can then leap out 14 inches, perhaps more, and then again be a threat. So again, if the opponent's breaking through here, really going after that objective, I've now got Banshees, Fire Dragons, Shining Spears. They can all leap on top of that with firepower and close combat. So there's really dangerous, prickly threat here from the Eldar, but at the same time hidden nicely away. Depending on how the opponent deploys, I place these here or here. I've gone central, but they could easily be effectively deployed on this right hand side. So that leaves the Avatar of Khaine. I've watched all the opponent's deployment taking place, so I can then try and deploy the Avatar in a way where I'm going to minimize as much as I can the firepower that's going to come against him. So Avatar of Khaine, where to put him? He's the most controversial unit in the army. I've got a lot of criticism for the way I deploy him and use him in games. If I go defensive on him, so I tuck him in here and I keep him hidden away, I think you lose his worth. His worth is that he is a major psychological threat on the board, and so to have him as a threat, and what I mean by that is up here posing a threat, pushing across the board, I think it's much more value doing it that way. Obviously the danger is you lose him, then you've lost the value of him. So that's the tricky one. Do you try and keep him alive and limit what he can do, or do you try and make him a threat and then try and keep him alive as much as possible? So I'm looking around here. I've stacked up pretty good on the right, and in the middle's really good. And perhaps I've looked at the opponent's deployment and they've countered this by deploying most of their army over there. Then I then see an opportunity for a quiet flank and an open objective to then use the Avatar of Khaine. Again, most of the opponent's forces across the other side, so I'm going to blindside a lot of their firepower. So all of a sudden, here might be a good deployment. So I'm not fully obscured, but knowing that the opponent can't bring all their firepower to bear because let's say they've deployed over across that side, they've got minimal units across the other side, then here is a good spot. I've got my eyes on an objective which I can reach well enough. I think the Avatar goes 10 inches. I can boost him and give him another 2, and then after that he can still charge, and he's reached that objective. So that's a really good threat there with the Avatar of Khaine. It seems to be that if you are going to use him aggressively, he's better on a flank, not tight on the flank, but shifting over to a flank. Center of the board gets really hot, and I want to try and avoid the opponent's ability to concentrate firepower on him, because if they're able to do that, there's a chance it can be brought down. So trying to blindside the opponent, and that's where a deployment is so important. I can watch where most of the opponent's army is and then deploy the Avatar of Khaine so into a quieter zone on the table. We've gone for here, so he's a threat towards that objective. Now if I've then, as the game goes on, I then pursue that threat, so I move out, I grab the objective, I've got myself there, so tactically that's great, I'm on the objective, I can try and control that. But he's now a threat to the middle of the table, because he can head off 10, 12 inches in that direction. All of a sudden he's a threat there. He's also a threat to the opponent's deployment zone. I can push all the way through and across to the other side and be a threat to the opponent's deployment zone as well. That's a good use for the Avatar of Khaine, I think, if he's able to stay alive. Moving out to no man's land and a threat to the middle of the table, the opponent's deployment zone. If the opponent doesn't deal with him, then he's going to start dominating that side of the board. It gives the opponent a conundrum. Do they invest a lot of effort to try and get rid of him, or do they ignore the Avatar of Khaine and go after the other units? The idea is that yes, the Avatar of Khaine is going to be targeted, and the idea is that if he's been targeted, then it's distracting away from the rest of my Eldar force, which is a lot softer. And so yeah, he is a distraction Carnifex is there to absorb the attention and firepower of the opponent, but it's deliberate. The idea is to protect these other softer units. Sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong. The avatar's brought down quite quick and I get criticized for it, but I want to use them aggressively. So it's just trying to be cunning at the same time, trying to offset the damage that potentially will come in, but at the same time still try and be a threat, in this case over on the left hand flank. So that's deployment then. So Avatar of Khaine tucked in here. If the opponent goes first, I've obscured most of the army. They're going to have to work hard at these angles to try and catch units. If they do, I'm going to get the benefit of cover usually. If they do manage to triangulate some firepower against the Avatar of Khaine, I'm going to get cover, and I've got a real tough unit to start absorbing damage. So I think on turn 1, if I didn't go first, it's fine. The advantage is, if I'm nicely obscured and the opponent's moved out, then they've come closer towards me, haven't caused much damage, and then I'm in a real good position to counterattack, and Eldari are good at that. Or if I'm going first, or whatever turn it is, I'm in position to move out onto objectives. So I can move out here and snatch, move out here and snatch, and then move out here with him and snatch, and again it's going to put the opponent under pressure. We're on all of the objectives, and then backing that attack up with Wraithlords pushing through, laying down firepower, Shining Spears, manoeuvring into position as a counter-attack unit. Then as the game goes on, if I get pressure on a flank somewhere and need a bit of firepower support, I'll bring on the Wind Riders to lay down a blanket of Shuriken Cannon firepower. And then if I need to try and go for an ambush against an enemy unit to back up my own back line, then I can use the Shining Spears. Or I can send them on like recon, and they can go out hunting secondaries across the board as well. So that's the plan, that's deployment here, just an example of this Eldar force. So protecting units by getting them behind terrain. Ambush is another key, so the Eldar are able to jump out, coordinate firepower in close combat. With multiple units, works really well for them. And then the threat range as well. I've got some key units that are a threat immediately in the game, either jumping across and using firepower like the Fire Dragons, or the Banshees able to swiftly move out across the board. So that's the video. Keep a lookout for more videos in this series. If you've enjoyed this one, just to help you out on deployment, leave a thumbs up and a comment below. And for extra content and for like list development videos, which is a very popular series on YouTube channel membership, join us on membership. Most people go for Aspect Warrior level. If you sign up for that, it unlocks all the bonus content that we have, including battle reports, including our league games as well. That's on YouTube channel membership. Link for that below. You can go to the channel homepage and hit the join button. It's the lowest tier that we have, and it just unlocks all the content that we have, gets you onto our Discord community as well, and it helps support the channel. So do join us on membership, and you can check out the army development videos for list development tactics there with those, and the exclusive battle reports that we have as well. Thanks for watching. Tune in next time.